I think LSU, to me, is the biggest wild card team in this whole picture right now. There are flaws we're figuring out about teams. There are strengths either that we thought that have been validated or are starting to scale to what they should have been all along. With LSU, what was interesting about that Arkansas game last week, as opposed to the Ole Miss game the week before, is it should have been a bad spot for LSU. And even if they
Right.
win that game, I thought dogfight win. And not only did they go in there against a rested Arkansas team with all the motivation in the world, they handled the game. They outrushed Arkansas. They ran the ball as well as they have all season. They shut Arkansas down on the ground. The defensive staff there has been able to generate pressure. The players, courtesy of the defensive staff, has been able to generate pressure. And so you combine that with three really dependable pass catchers, good tight end, and then you've got a quarterback that I'm not going to call him an unknown. I'm going to call him right along with the team a big wild card, because if Garrett Nussmeier has a hot November, like LSU could be in Atlanta. LSU could be
Yeah.
playing for and competing for the SEC championship. And I will admit that's not something I thought I'd be saying when I watched them barely survive South Carolina a few weeks ago. But that's the beauty of college football, in that you've got still a very developmental style game. And some of these teams do this crazy thing and they get better over the course of a season. That's the team I've got right now. To a certain degree, Clemson as well. But LSU is by far my biggest wild card team in this picture, because unlike some of these other teams whose ceiling may still be a little beneath that of a national championship contender, if all the pieces fell into place for LSU and you fast forwarded to January, you wouldn't shock me showing them in semifinal contention.
No, and I'll tell you that here's one of the things that I can remember having long conversations about 5 years ago, 6 years, 7, 8 years ago, that is still omnipresent in college football. Your first three or four games, the actual game reps, and I've talked to players about this. This kind of got going. Remember, Trey Smith had the blood clot deal,
Yeah.
and he did not practice during the week. And so he finally comes back week 4 or 5, whatever it was. He didn't play well. Well, then all of a sudden, week 8, I mean, he was literally that guy that looked like a character on Street Fighter that was throwing people around. And we had them late in the season. And I said, were your game reps essentially practice reps? And he said, yeah, I had to use those because I wasn't going out there and practicing. Well, it's a little bit different, but it's not, where there's so little contact in fall. The only way to get good up front, offense or defense, is to do it in full pads, full speed against people trying to make you look bad. Well, that's so limited now that a lot of people don't have a feel of what it is or who they are or what they are. So it takes 3, 4 games along with those game reps and then more practice reps to get to what you're talking about. Better, improve, actually, and know what the guy next to you is going to do and not do and what he needs help with. So, and quarterbacks, receivers getting on the same page. That physicality takes time to get a feel for. I'm with you on LSU. I think running back hasn't been healthy. They're starting to figure that out a little bit. They got aliens at wide receiver.
Yeah.
You're not going to really be able to just match up with them out there. And like you said, the tight end can work the middle of the field and the flat. Uh, Defensively, though, is what I really like. I mean, you got a legit edge presence now with number 4. 40 is turning into a game wrecker. Like Weeks is one of those guys we talked about earlier that can take over a game, because I don't think that he is the most assignment sound linebacker or the most read the keys and react linebacker. He's see ball, get ball, go
Yeah.
attack. And that entire defense, this is a little hard to explain because it feels super elementary. But when I watch LSU, what I feel like Blake Baker has done is gotten them to buy into, at full speed, attacking the football. And I think last year it was a little bit kind of like wait, leverage the sideline, stay in your gap, stay in your space. I think Blake Baker's like, hey, man, here's the gasoline, pour it on your hair, light it on fire, and just go rip and try to knock somebody down. And they do that, and it's working for them. So the biggest concern would be that Garrett Nussmeier thinks he can fit the ball in any humanly space possible. So he's going to throw 2 or 3 to the other color jersey. And there was a couple last week that weren't caught. So if those are caught down the road, that could be an issue. But man, they feel like a team that's just slowly starting to figure themselves out more and more each year. I'm going to give you Clemson,
Yeah.
because if you get a quarterback that has the talent and ability that learns how to take care of the football, and you've heard me say it, I always feel like that turnover chromosome, like you can't rewire that DNA. It's either in you or it's not, but you can limit it. And if he learns to limit it with some pretty good skill and a front seven that can still take over a game, that's one that I could see sort of getting into a situation. And I'll give you Boise too, because I think that they can play a different style of football. Now, I don't think the defense is athletic enough to maybe beat a lot of these teams we're talking about, but if you're talking about making a run, I do think Boise might be able to be that team. It's weird that you said, because there's a, God, I could make a case for Iowa State a little bit, but defense, athleticism, speed, really worried about it. I feel like Texas A&M, if you get the Missouri Connor Wigman, they can beat anybody in America.
Oh, yeah.
Because that D-line can take over a game.
Yeah. That game this weekend, I'm glad they play each other, LSU and A&M. I asked Tuesday night, and it's been 48 some odd hours. I still can't answer this question. Do I trust Connor Wigman? Because I've watched him throw multiple interceptions in several games. Yeah. He threw, I think, 2 picks and probably 4 more interceptable balls against Mississippi State last week. So I'm fresh off watching him just carve up Missouri, and I want to believe, and they won the game last week, but if I just copy paste that performance, they're not winning enough of them. I'll tell you another one before we move on here. I'm going to call Miami a wild card team, and people may scoff at that because they're already ranked high. But I don't think the defensive effort they're given right now is going to wash in the playoffs, like against a Georgia or against fill in the blank, whoever you think they play. You remember 2019 and 2023 LSU respectively. So 2019 LSU, they start the season and then it starts to grow to a boil, and Joe Burrow becomes what he is, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and all those receivers. But they weren't great defensively at the beginning of the year, and they never became great statistically. But what they did become is very opportunistic. They became a really good situational team, really good red zone team, and they ended up becoming one of the best teams of all time. 2023 LSU also has a Heisman contender that ends up winning the Heisman at quarterback, but they are so off the cliff horrific defensively that it basically wastes that season. And so I think about Miami right now, and they're a wild card. You don't have to become 2019 LSU to go down the road of 2019 LSU. They're going to go down one of those 2 divergent paths, and I can't figure out which one it's going to be right now.
Here's what you need. You need really good veteran college football players at certain spots, and 2019 is a perfect example of that. Now, Patrick Queen was big-time talent. Yep. But Jacoby Stevens, great college football player who played like every position in the secondary. Neil Farrell Jr., Rashard Lawrence, both veteran D tackles who had great seasons that year. Like Braden Fajoko played really well for them that year. They had guys like Glenn Logan that helped them out. I had to go back and look up these names because I had forgotten about them. Did they have a Derek Stingley Jr.? Yeah, but you had some top end talent. Caleb on Chason turned into a legit edge guy on that team, but you got to have that solid foundation. And I think LSU has a couple of those guys defensively right now. But 2, I think about matchups, and I know you're an Iowa State nerd, but I've kind of taken the dive into them here in the last couple of weeks to see a little bit more about them. I feel like I'm watching one of these Brock Purdy Iowa State teams, like 2 and 3 tight ends. The run scheme is incredible with fullbacks and tight ends moving around. They're blocking back on people, different type gap scheme runs, efficient at quarterback. They have a couple backs that have real juice. Like I said, athleticism defensively, I would be concerned about, but I know they could slow the game down against a lot of people and be a problem with how they would move the ball on offense. I think what you're saying about Miami, and I'm with you, like Miami to me is an and one team. That's what they are. Like if you want to talk about the behind the back 360 dunks and like 3-pointers from half court, they will wow you from start to finish. Speed, athleticism, side, arm angle throws, catches, all of that. Like guys rushing off the edge. I don't know if it's as much effort in my opinion. It's just there's a lot of it that looks sloppy. And for a team that's sitting there at 7-0, ranked in the top 5 most of the year, how could you say they're sloppy? But they're so athletic, so fast that they kind of get away with it. And they got a quarterback that can he's like hot sauce running point. I mean, he can just make it happen. So if they continue to find ways to sort of clean it up a little bit, Miami's going to be hell on wheels come playoff time.